I felt the moment my sister clinked her glass. Thanksgiving in my parents' house was always loud. Laughing, scraping chairs, the smell of rosemary and garlic in the air. Yet that sound cut straight through everything. A tiny, bright tap, like someone announcing the opening act of a show I wasn't invited to rehearse for. "Everyone," my sister Lily called out, practically glowing under the chandelier. "I have news. Mom and Dad are signing all 4 houses, 2 in California, 2 in Florida, over to me." She paused dramatically, her smile stretching wide. "Anna gets nothing." She said it like she was tossing confetti. Like I was supposed to laugh at my own erasure. The room erupted. Claps, whistles, even a few cheers from relatives who adored Lily's drama more than they ever pretended to adore me. Someone actually yelled, "About time." And my mother, in her peach-colored blouse, dabbed the corner of her eye like this was some touching milestone. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. I didn't do anything except smile the way you smile when a storm hits, but you already know the house that's about to blow apart was never really built for you anyway. I set my fork down gently. "Dad," I said, barely above a whisper, "should I tell them? Or will you?" The effect was instant. His spoon slipped from his hand and clattered against his plate. Lily's grin froze, stiff and tight, like a mask suddenly glued to her face. "Tell us what?" she demanded, voice already sharpened by fear she didn't understand yet. "But before I take you into that moment, into the silence that broke the holiday open like a bone snapping, I need to tell you where it all began. My name is Anna Caldwell, and if you'd met my family before this Thanksgiving, you might have thought we were picture perfect. Michigan raised, sunlit porch photos, coordinated fall outfits we pretended we didn't plan. We looked like people who celebrated each other. People who rooted for one another. But my family didn't break in loud ways. We cracked in quiet ones, those barely there choices that tell you who matters and who doesn't. Lily never lived in the quiet space. She was the favorite, loud, brilliant, and magnetic. She could sneeze and somehow relatives would congratulate her for doing it beautifully. I didn't hate her for it. I just learned early that I'd have to build my life with my own 2 hands because no one was passing me anything. I moved to Denver after college to work as a genetic counselor. My parents called it running away. Meanwhile, Lily stayed close, visiting every weekend, always perfectly framed as the loyal daughter who never strayed too far. Still, I came home for holidays. Mostly for my Aunt Rachel, the only person who saw me without comparing me to Lily's brightness. She'd greet me at the door, squeeze my shoulders and whisper, "You're tougher than they think." It always felt like she was planting a seed I'd need to grow later. This Thanksgiving felt wrong before the turkey even hit the table. Mom flitted around the kitchen with a smile stretched too thin. Dad kept wiping his glasses even though they were spotless. Lily kept touching her hair, smoothing what didn't need smoothing. Something was in the air, electric, expectant, as if the whole house was holding a secret but pretending not to. Then I noticed a small thing. An empty chair next to mine was gone, not pushed aside. Gone, removed entirely. I should have known then. 6 months earlier, everything had started to shift. Quietly at first. It was early June when Mom called, asking me to come home for a family meeting. That phrase alone made my stomach twist. My family didn't hold meetings unless something was wrong. When I arrived, they ushered me into the den like they were staging an intervention. Dad had a folder on the coffee table. Tan, thick, and ominous. "We need your help," Mom said, her voice sweet and shaky. "Just a signature. Something related to the family property." Property. That word never meant anything to me. I grew up in a 2-bedroom Michigan home. But they said it like it carried weight I didn't understand. Dad cleared his throat. "We're arranging ownership documents for the 4 houses. Estate planning. Nothing complicated." I wasn't stupid. Why am I being asked to sign something? They exchanged glances that said more than their words ever had. Dad pushed the folder toward me. Just technical authorization. You don't need to read everything. I opened it anyway. Pages, legal language, signatures that weren't mine, already printed under statements I hadn't agreed to. It didn't smell right. It didn't feel right. And it definitely wasn't simple. I told them I wanted a lawyer to look it over. The temperature in the room dropped. Mom's face tightened. Dad closed the folder too fast. There's no need to complicate things, he said. But I took the papers anyway. Back in Denver, my attorney took one look and asked, "Did you know your name was listed on these documents 6 years ago?" I felt my chest tighten. What do you mean? I never signed anything. She pointed to a page. A signature. My name. Written in a handwriting that looked similar to mine. Similar enough that someone who didn't know me could be fooled. "Anna," she said gently, "these aren't new. Someone's been filing property records under your name for years." My head spun. My name. My identity. Used without my knowledge. And not for my benefit. The 4 properties, 2 beach houses in Florida, 2 rental homes in Southern California, weren't new acquisitions. They'd been transferred around quietly for over a decade. My name kept appearing then disappearing from the paperwork. Someone had been using me on paper. Someone close. Someone who assumed I'd never check. The following weeks were a blur of documents, inconsistent signatures, and notarized filings that made no sense. Half the paperwork listed Lily as part owner, half listed me, and sometimes both. My attorney's voice was cautious when she said, "Someone manipulated these records, Anna. And whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then Lily started posting hints online. Selfies at one of the California houses. Captions like, "Future's looking bright," and "Major life changes ahead." The puzzle pieces clicked in my mind with brutal clarity. Someone had used my identity to funnel ownership. Someone had signed my name where it didn't belong. Someone had used me as a placeholder, something legal, something strategic, until Lily was ready to reap the benefits. 4 properties. 2 states. Years of quiet, calculated movements. All behind my back. A week before Thanksgiving, Dad called telling me Lily wanted to host holidays in one of her new places someday. Her new places. As in, she thought they were hers. That's when I stopped hoping this was a misunderstanding. I gathered every document. The real ones, the forged ones, the ones showing their little shell game. I put them in a binder so heavy it felt like carrying the truth itself. And I waited. Thanksgiving morning, I drove home with the binder in my bag, rehearsing what I'd say. I didn't want to humiliate them. But I wasn't going to let my name be used like spare change in a family scheme. Inside, everything was already staged. The long table. The extra leaves. The polished silver. And Lily, standing at the head of the table, practically vibrating with excitement. I sat down quietly, my binder resting against my leg. Aunt Rachel met my eyes and gave a small nod. She knew something was wrong. She always did. Then Lily tapped her glass. And said those words. "Mom and Dad are signing all 4 houses to me. Anna gets nothing." Cheers. Whistles. Claps. I smiled. "Dad," I whispered. "Should I tell them? Or will you?" His spoon fell. Lily's voice cracked. "Tell us what?" The room froze. Forks suspended in mid-air, relatives leaning forward as if the next words might pull them through the floor. Dad's face had lost color entirely. Mom's hand trembled over her wine glass. Lily, for once, had no script, no sparkle, just fear widening her eyes. I placed the binder on the table in front of me, the leather cover making a dull thump against the polished wood. I didn't open it yet. I let it sit there, heavy and silent, like the warning bell that had been missing in our family for years. "Should I begin?" I asked softly. Not loud, not accusatory, but calm. Calm carried weight. Calm told people you were about to cut through all the pretense they had built around themselves. "Anna," Mom's voice quavered. Maybe not now." I shook my head. Now is exactly right. Today's the day. Everyone deserves to know exactly what they're applauding. Lily's lip trembled. I don't understand," she stammered. "These are my houses. Mom, Dad, Lily," I said, flipping open the binder and sliding it toward the center of the table. "All 4 of these properties aren't actually yours. Not legally. At least, not yet." The room murmured, soft gasps, whispers, some distant clinking of cutlery. Dad coughed, futilely, trying to regain control. I continued. "The paperwork you've been showing off, the posts online, the photos of your supposed new homes. They were built on something you never owned. Someone forged my name, manipulated signatures, filed documents without my knowledge. 4 years, I've been the legal placeholder for these houses. Not you. Not Mom or Dad. Me." The binder's pages spread out in front of everyone. Each one a revelation. Every deed, notarized form, and property record exposed the chain of deceit. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. The proof spoke louder than any voice could. Lily's hands flew to her face. "No. That's impossible. I've been paying the taxes, the utilities. I shook my head slowly. "Everything you've done, every dollar, every document signed, was done under the assumption these houses were yours. But legally, they were mine the entire time. You've been living in someone else's legal shadow. And Mom and Dad, they let it happen." Mom gasped, tears welling up in her eyes. "Anna, we didn't." "Don't," I said, voice steady. "You've spent years pretending this wasn't happening. Pretending I wasn't here. Pretending my existence was optional." Lily's fiancé, Ryan, leaned forward, jaw tight. "Wait, are you saying she's lying? The houses aren't hers." I looked him in the eye. "I'm not lying. I have every document to prove it. All 4 houses, all the filings, everything. And it's not just the properties. They've been using my identity, Ryan. That's fraud. That's why I have this binder. That's why I'm here." The room grew colder. Relatives shifted, realizing the story they'd applauded moments ago was built on deception. My grandmother, Grace Caldwell, rose slowly from her chair, resting a hand on the back of Lily's. "Anna," she said softly, "is this true?" I nodded. "Yes. And if you think this ends with applause, it doesn't. Because I've already called the estate attorney. They've begun reviewing all filings. They're aware of the forgeries. By the time Thanksgiving ends, these properties will be legally corrected. They will be mine, or returned to the rightful owner if the records show someone else was meant to inherit." Lily's face went pale. She sank back in her chair as if the floor had opened beneath her. But, Mom said. "Mom said what was convenient," I said. "She didn't tell me the truth. They all hid behind the illusion that I was naive, that I wouldn't notice, that I'd let them play games with my name. Well, I did notice. And now everyone knows." Dad tried to interject. "Anna, this is a family matter. You don't need to." I cut him off, holding up a hand. "No. You don't get to say that. You don't get to act surprised that I've been quiet while you built a house of cards on my identity. You don't get to expect me to clap while my sister pretends to be the golden daughter with a fortune that isn't hers. Mom buried her face in her hands. Lily's lips trembled, and Ryan finally stepped back from her. The tension was almost physical, pressing down on everyone's shoulders. I took a deep breath, letting the binder sit open, the truth glaring back at them. Anna, Lily whispered, voice shaking. I didn't know. I thought they were mine. I thought. You thought they were yours because no one told you otherwise, I said quietly. And you didn't check. But that's not my fault. And that's not theirs, entirely. It's the system they created. One where they could manipulate reality as long as I stayed silent. The silence in the room was sharp. Cutlery was abandoned. The turkey sat steaming, half-carved, as if waiting for an apology that would never come. Everyone realized. The stage had shifted. The lead role was no longer Lily's. It was mine. And I wasn't performing. Then, just when the tension seemed unbearable, there was a knock at the front door. Hard. Repeated. Insistent. Dad's face went white. Mom's hands froze. Lily's head snapped toward the sound, panic widening her eyes. I stood, crossing the room slowly. They're here, I said. The people who handle property verification. The identity investigation team I called last week. The door opened. A woman in a tailored suit stepped in, badge clipped to her belt. Calm, professional, unreadable. The room collectively exhaled. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell? She asked. I need to verify some ownership records regarding the properties listed under Ms. Anna Caldwell's name. Please have a seat. Dad's jaw went slack. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Lily froze, every ounce of color drained from her face. I remained seated, calm, patient, watching as the truth moved into the room and took its rightful place. The investigator began asking questions. Polite, professional, precise. These properties, the California rentals, the Florida homes. Can you confirm the signatures? Were all deeds filed correctly? She looked at Lily and my parents in turn. Or were there unauthorized filings under Ms. Caldwell's identity? My parents stumbled, stuttered, tried explanations. Mom whispered frantic denials. Dad's throat worked but no words came. Lily's hands shook in her lap. I watched them unravel. Every deflection, every half-truth, every nervous glance toward me crumbled under the weight of cold, official scrutiny. They couldn't charm their way out. They couldn't spin. They were exposed. Finally, the investigator closed her notebook. Thank you for your cooperation, she said evenly. We'll be following up on all the filings. It appears that Ms. Caldwell's identity was misused, and legal remedies will be pursued. All 4 properties will be reviewed, and ownership will be corrected. The room was silent. Ryan muttered under his breath. I can't believe this. He looked at Lily, who was practically melting into her chair. All this time. I leaned back, satisfied, calm, collected, not victorious in a gloating way, but victorious in a truth that couldn't be denied. My grandmother stepped forward, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Anna, she said. You didn't let fear or love for them stop you from standing for what's right. Mom buried her face in the napkin. Dad muttered something about embarrassment. Lily finally whispered, voice small. What happens now? You face the consequences of your choices, I said. You face reality. The properties you claimed, the identity you used, the lies you lived under, they all come back to the truth. And I am the truth. Lily's tears ran down her cheeks. Ryan took her hand but stayed silent. Mom wept openly. Dad slumped back, pale and defeated. For the first time in my life, I felt the weight lift from my chest. I had taken my place at the table, not as the quiet daughter, the one ignored, the one who had to watch while others took her name and life, but as someone who could no longer be silenced. In the weeks that followed, the legal process corrected everything. The properties were properly assigned, the fraudulent filings removed, and Lily had to accept the reality she'd built her plans on lies. The family dynamic shifted overnight. My parents could no longer hide behind appearances. The favoritism, the manipulations, they were out in the open. And for the first time, everyone had to confront it. Lily started therapy, slowly unpacking the years of entitlement and the realization that some of what she believed was built on deceit. She called me often, not to fight, but to ask questions, to understand, to rebuild a sense of honesty she'd never learned. And I listened. I guided. I protected myself without burning bridges unnecessarily, because revenge was never about destruction. It was about restoring the balance that had been stolen from me. Mom and Dad eventually sold the houses they hadn't yet manipulated, downsized, and lived in quiet apartments. The public performances, the golden child illusions, they ended. Thanksgiving became simpler, softer, less about appearances and more about the fragile but genuine bonds we could rebuild if we were willing. And as for me, I learned what I should have known years ago. Truth is never betrayal. Silence is. Families built on lies collapse eventually. But families willing to face reality, even painfully, can survive. And sometimes, surviving means taking your rightful place and not apologizing for it. That Thanksgiving, the moment Lily tapped her glass and declared victory, I could have stayed quiet. I could have smiled politely and let them cheer. But instead, I opened the binder, spoke the truth, and watched everything shift. And for once, the storm didn't break me. It cleared the path. I hope, wherever you are listening tonight, you can feel that. The path through family betrayal, favoritism, manipulation, and lies can be brutal. But the moment you stop letting others write your story for you, the moment you claim your identity and your truth, everything else follows. So tell me, as you hear this, if you had been sitting at that table, would you have stayed silent, or would you have picked up the binder too? Moral lessons. This story teaches us that truth and integrity are more powerful than appearances or favoritism. No matter how quietly you may have been overlooked or how much others try to manipulate your life, standing up for yourself and claiming your identity is never wrong. It is necessary. Family, while meant to protect and support, can sometimes fail. But that doesn't mean you should stay silent or let others decide your fate. Protect your boundaries, verify the facts, and trust your instincts, even when it feels uncomfortable. And remember, courage isn't always loud. It can be quiet, precise, and unshakable, like Anna sitting at that Thanksgiving table, letting the truth speak for itself. By valuing honesty, holding others accountable, and refusing to be erased, you empower not just yourself, but also those around you who may be silently struggling.